3,000. Big. 3-1 target, north boom stack, 36,000, 13,000. Bang. 40 scope, short skate, hot, right.
This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
First Name Friday, March 24th.
Friday. How are you, Paul?
Forgot my stripper dollars again, Jason. Had them
So weird when you say that.
Had them in my truck. Well, your wife is the one that brought them up.
What?
The
I'm not talking about
dollars.
stripper dollars. I'm
Oh.
talking about you calling me Jason.
Oh. See, I'm gonna resort back to my tactic of just not using names for the next hour or so. So what do we got on tap for this week
Dude, I don't know.
or this month?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a shit show right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk for a second before we get to the nitty gritty of the podcast.
Spill your
You
guts,
good
brother.
with that?
Yeah. You need a vent.
Well, man, we talk a lot on the podcast, and I'm sure people think we have our shit together. But fuck, man, I'm telling you, it's just, God damn it, every fucking day there's something I'm dealing with, there's something I'm working on, and it never ends. Yeah. So we got all this stuff going on around the house right now, and I'm tell you what, man, this shit gives me anxiety. Because I got people in the house and like they're moving stuff around and like they're working in under the sink and there's new shit going in under the sink and now and I'm like a super organized dude, right? And they're totally fucking my flow up and it's anyway. So yeah, I got shit to work on too. Did you lose your mic?
It changed colors on me, and I think I just tapped the dealio or whatever. But okay, so listeners, what you guys don't know is CAS is a very particular kind of person. So I can imagine the organizational hell that he's going to have to go through to reorganize his under the sink cabinet in here. And I'm sure his little fucking scrubby sponges.
That's right. And then I'm going to be pissed off for like 2 weeks because things aren't going to be where I expect them to, or they're going to be in a new place, and I have to learn that. And I'm too old for this shit.
Learning another language. So I kind of have a similar but different. The other day, Katie and I had gone out to eat, and it was Friday night or whatever. We're sitting over here at Texas Roadhouse. She wanted a steak and potatoes. All right, great. Well, we're on the waiting list, so we're sitting in our car just chilling, and she starts trying to redeem this gift card that her mama got her for Christmas so that we can pay for dinner with it and, write it off or whatever. And she's talking to me, and she's Katie has an outer monologue that she uses, and she does it when she's texting too. And I'll tell her every time, I'm like, you're doing it again, because she'll go, do you want to? And I'm like, you're fucking texting out loud. Stop that shit. So she's doing this as she's trying to do this gift card thing, whatnot. And then all of a sudden she starts talking to me about itineraries. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? We got to have an itinerary to go get steak and potatoes now? And she goes, oh, no. I changed topics. I'm on Norway. Because we're going to Norway this summer. She went that quick from itinerary or from redeeming a gift card to now doing an itinerary. And I'm like, I'm supposed to know this stuff?
Yeah.
Like, you've got this conversation in your brain that's like 4 paragraphs in, and then you say it out loud. And I'm supposed to know this? So like your under the sink thing, it's like learning a new language every time she does this shit to me.
Yeah. Well, and you know what else I hate about having people over to do stuff at the house is you're held captive, right? Like I've been held captive in my house the entire fucking day, and I'm about to lose my goddamn mind. So, and then this morning I was all stressed out because I got to the gym at they were supposed to be here between 8:30 and 9:30, but as they typically do, they didn't get here till 10, which was actually a good thing because when I got to the gym this morning at 8 o'clock, I sent Alicia a text and I go, I'm not going to be able to take a fucking shower when I get home. I'm like, I did not plan this well. Like, I should have just rode the bike this morning.
So your water is completely cut off right now?
Our water's been off since 10 o'clock this morning, right?
Geez.
And so I was like, so then I actually left the gym a little early, flew home, and was able to beat him here and get a shower, obviously, before they showed up. But
I know there's a pretty good
been a
fountain.
day.
There's a pretty good fountain just right up the road here.
Yeah, well, what I was going to do is if that didn't work, I was just going to go to the base and take a shower at the base gym.
Do you not have gyms at your or showers at your gym?
No.
Little tiny.
Well,
guy.
they do,
Okay.
but I'd already left, so I would have had to drive back. That would have been awkward. So
That's funny.
yeah, it's not like
Sorry,
that.
I'm just here to.
Hey, I'm here to use the shower.
So the water at the gym on base, it takes like 30 minutes for it to even lukewarm. Yeah, so it's a cold shower.
Standard government contract.
Yeah,
to the lowest bidder. Okay,
I tell you.
all right. First name Friday.
Yeah,
you've already used my call sign once, by the way.
Did I?
Yeah.
When did I do that?
When you were telling the story about, you said that I'm a particular kind of person, but you let it out. Yeah. So, anyways, I'm keeping track. So first name Friday, we're going to talk. We got a couple questions from the listeners, and I think the first one we're going to start with was the one that you picked there, Roscoe, which it was talking about in general, like things that matter, and things that don't matter
in big picture sense,
yeah,
like in your life,
in life,
maybe not obviously having hot water in your house, or even in your case, running water in your house.
Running water would be nice right now.
That matters a little bit, but I think we're talking a little more grandiose than that.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yep.
Some notes that I had, and I know you got a lot of copious notes too, but I had just some simple things like your character.
Yeah,
matters. And there's that. I think it was John Wooden. He's a famous basketball coach from UCLA, and he said, I want to know your character, because your reputation is just what everybody else thinks about you. Your character is who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's, it's kind of deep on a couple of levels, but I think that if you can start to really reflect on your character and what kind of person you are and how you want to actively project that stuff. And this is nothing new that we haven't talked about on the podcast before with the values and whatnot.
And practicing integrity. But
I don't know, man. I think that's pretty important. And I was having this conversation with a dude the other day at work. He's a former Navy CO, former Hornet guy that I work with. And he was telling me some stories about the conduct that they do on the boats, and officers versus enlisted, and places that enlisted people can't go on the boats.
They have officer country.
And so he's telling me this story about, there's there's an enlisted guy who goes into officer country because if he can just get down this passageway 20 feet or so and break left, then he's where he needs to go in 30 seconds. Otherwise, it's like a 15-minute walk around the boat to get to where he wants to go, but he's got to pass through officer country, right? And so the officers will come in there and they'll just jack these guys up like, what the fuck, you do this officer country? You get out of here, And I looked right at the guy. I was like, dude, were you ever conflicted with that? Because, I get it. You're on the boat and you're in the Navy and this is what you guys do, but didn't you want to just be a good person?
Yeah.
And so that really struck me as kind of it's
a weird dichotomy.
It was so weird, man. Like I think of myself as a pretty decent dude. I don't know if I'd be able to do that. I guess if you've been doing it for 20 years, you're kind of indoctrinated to it.
Yeah, maybe. But again, if a guy's got to get to work and that's a shorter route, like why not just let him walk the shorter route?
Exactly. That's what I said.
And if your ego's so big, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that you don't want enlisted people in officer country, then just have them do the same shit that we did in basic training and all that stuff. Like get up against the wall, the position of attention, say good morning, sir, and let you pass. Right.
Well, from my point of view as an officer, I would like to think that I would kind of look both ways and be like, all right, come on, dude.
No doubt, right. So, he's with me.
So, like you said, man, I was really conflicted with that.
I wonder if there's other things that happen on the boat or the BOAT that requires them to do those types of things. Like I don't know, like just the understanding of who has priority for passageways for when you're doing different drills or why they segregate it like that. Maybe it's easier for them to control any kind of fraternization issues or things like that.
I think fraternization is probably a big piece of it. I think tradition is a big piece of it from hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
Seriously, this conversation that the dude and I were having, we were in the break room for like 50 minutes. And my jaw was on the floor the entire time with some of the things he was telling me. I came home and told Katie, and she goes, "No way!" Yeah. And she starts Googling, and like bread and water. Holy shit, dude! they can put the enlisted guys on bread and water rations.
Oh my gosh, you guys are kidding me.
No, he said he explained the whole captain mask to me and all this stuff and how it's all formal and shit. And he looks at his JAG and goes, I'm thinking about bread and water. How many days? JAG says, 3 days. 3 days, bread and water. And
that's it, huh?
The kid gets bread and water for 3 days. I'm
That's
like,
ridiculous.
oh my, dude, I was blown away. I kept telling him, I have so many questions. This is going to be continued. I have so many questions. Holy shit.
Yeah. But I agree with you, man. Character is super important.
Yeah.
And I know reputation in some sense is separated from that because there can be a false perception that maybe the group around you. But I will tell you, at least in smaller groups or like in the world that we grew up in, because the communities are so small, your character ends up being a pretty close reflection to the reputation that follows you from fighter squadron.
I would say so. And you got to be careful too, because your reputation precedes you a lot of times.
It does.
And that's something that's hard to shake.
It can be if it's a bad one, right? Because people will have a false perception of you before you even get there.
Yeah.
Or a false idea or concept of who you are and what you're really about before you get there. So that's a good one. I like that one a lot.
In my profession, we hire all retired former fighter pilot guys.
Yeah.
And there's a fairly good group of us now. And when we have a new guy, we got a spot open, we got a new guy that's applied to it. The first thing my manager does is he sticks his nugget out the door and he says, hey, does anybody know?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the call sign. Does anybody know Jason? Yeah, Jason's an asshole. All right, Jason's out. And he throws it in the trash and moves on to the next guy. I mean, it's that simple.
We do that at the airline. I mean, the airlines, even though they're big and there's a lot of pilots, same thing happens, right? You can write letters of recommendation. You can also directly email the hiring board and go, this guy's not a fit for our company. I wouldn't do this. And I would say, at least for the place that I work, 90% of the time, if they get a letter like that, they don't even get an interview.
Yeah. Well, I talk to a lot of guys that are still on active duty, and they ask me all the time about job openings and what it's like and all that kind of stuff. And I tell them all, I'm like, man, it really, and I hate to say this, but it really is a popularity contest at this point. Because, I mean, you think about it, man, after 20 years, we're all qualified to do the job. You got a couple thousand hours. You've been an instructor for a long damn time. Yeah, I mean, you've been doing this long enough to where the qualifications are easily met. It really comes down to, is he a good fit for the team? And that comes down to your reputation, which is a reflection of your character sometimes. Yeah. So anyways, what else do you have?
Right on. Well, the first one I put was relationships. I think relationships are important, right? Because like you and I have talked about on the podcast, we're hardwired for connection, and at the end of the day, man, the deep relationships that you've established with people are the things that are going to be important to you, or the things that you're going to remember, the things that you're going to reflect back on and appreciate in life, and they're the things that enrich our lives, honestly.
Yeah.
So I think, a lot of times as men, we get some messaging around maybe not managing relationships as good as we can, or maybe,
possibly.
I mean, I can tell you, me growing up in the household that I grew up in, and a lot of that's, I think, generational for my dad, but there was no instruction around that for me, like how to approach relationships, how to maintain relationships, how to keep a good relationship, kind of the ebb and flow that happens in them, the effort that it takes. And that may vary person to person too, right? It's the relationship and the effort that you put in with your wife may be different than what you have with some of your friend group.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's going to be obvious.
But I would say relationships are things that are important to cultivate, and they're very important to maintain, especially the good ones, the people that, you really care about, that where you have that emotional equity and it's a good back and forth that we've talked about. Those are important.
Well, and I very, very similar. I wrote down family, but I didn't define family as blood.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's not, and that's such a key. Yeah, that's such an important thing, because I think a lot of times we have this sense that family is blood, and if you came from a family that maybe wasn't the most supportive or the best environment, that can be very difficult to come over. But family is really what you create and who you create it with, right?
That's
right. Like Jim Bender, who we've talked about, who was my mentor.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, in some critical points in my life, he was more of a father to me than my own dad was.
Yeah.
Just because, one, of his availability, and two, he was just a little more emotionally intelligent, I think, in some ways than my father was. And he's family to me.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
he's part of that group.
every time you and I see each other and we greet each other, how do we greet each other?
Brother.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, my youngest brother is an adopted brother, so he's not blood.
Yeah.
Explain yourself.
Yeah.
You know, so you can't fall on that. I think it's a fallacy to say that family is blood. I think family is what you make it a lot of times.
I agree with you 100%.
You know, maybe you're estranged from your quote unquote family, or your mom, your dad, your siblings, whatever, however you're going to define that. But you're in a military unit where we all refer to each other as brothers in arms, because we bleed together, we sweat together, we go to war together, you know, and that's a special bond, man, that very few people, like, you don't get that working in an IT department in, you know, IBM. When you sleep in a foxhole with a dude, that's a different kind of bond that you have with that person. So I'm happy to call those people my brothers.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one, man.
Yeah. What else?
The next one I had was health. We've talked about this a couple of times recently in the podcast, right? And dude, your health matters. And for the younger guys out there, you got to start thinking about that stuff earlier than you think you do, because the poor decisions that you make now are going to reflect themselves down the road, you know? So if you're picking up some bad habits now, or you're not taking care of yourself, you know, or you've just been a little soft pudgy your whole life, you know, you got to do some things to correct it, man, because I, you know, the older we get, the more I see it. And I'm fortunate that, you know, and the military probably had some to do with that, because we had to do PT tests, you know, and I wasn't always as healthy. I had a period of my life where I was fat CAS.
I think we all have.
No problem. There's no doubt about that, right? I know, but it was for myself.
No, it doesn't matter if it's third person, first person. You fucking did it.
Was fat Jason. But health is important, right? You got to take care of yourself. And that's not just physically either, right? Yeah. Like, to me, that's kind of that whole body, mind, soul, spirit,
the three-legged stool
kind of thing that we talk about. You know, and some of that comes from the self-inspection stuff that we've talked about. Some of that comes from you finding out what works best for you from a meditative or reflective standpoint. And I don't mean that you need to sit on the floor in the lotus position for 20 minutes or anything, but unless that works for you, right? That works for some people. Meditation's super hard for me. Like, my mind's too fucking busy, dude. I'm such an internalizer, and I have so much shit bouncing around in my mind that it is impossible for me to, I can't quiet my mind like other people can. I've tried. I just can't do it. Like, I can't sit there for 20 minutes and not have a thought and focus on my breathing. I'll go out of my fucking mind, right? So that does not work for me, but I found other things that do. And so I think just finding those things for you that work, you know, or at least being intentional about finding those things. Because I don't think we pay a lot of attention to that when we're younger at all. You just kind of blitz through everything, right?
Yeah.
You know, or you just kind of lean on whatever things you were taught, whether it was from family or coaches or whoever growing up. But yeah, health's important.
Well, I want to be the first one to say that I have screwed this up wholesale in my life, where I've gone through phases or decades of not taking care of myself. So for me to sit here on my pulpit and preach to people about taking care of themselves, let's go back to the opener to the podcast, the intro, where it says, this is the podcast that we wish we'd had when we were younger. And I wish that in some respects, I wish that I would have known a lot of this stuff when I was 27 instead of 47. And it's cyclic too, I think. You know, it is. You're going to hit these busy phases. And I had somebody the other day, he referred to his life as he says, well, I'm just caught up in the noise of life. And I said, dude, stop. You know what the rest of us call that? We call that excuses. So if you're caught up in what you call the noise of life, you're not special. Everybody goes through this. Everybody's got busy times. I mean, raising kids, going to school, going through flight school, or you know, getting trained up for your new job, or having to go on work trips, or whatever it is. You're going to be busy. Life is busy.
Yeah, it is.
Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes it's a grind, but you can nug out. I was listening to this podcast the other day with Jocko Willink on it, and most people know who Jocko is. He's a famous dude, whatever. But he takes a picture of his watch every morning at 4:30. He gets up and he does his PT in the mornings. And the guy asked him, he says, "So is your workout plan? Is it like structured? Do you have days where you do certain things or whatever?" He goes, "No, honestly, man." He says, "My schedule is so hectic that some days I get up and I got 3 hours, and I'll go work out for 2 hours in the gym, and then I might go surfing for a little bit. Other days I've got to go catch a flight, and I've got 10 minutes. So I might just do burpees for 8 minutes and then go jump in the shower real quick.
Yeah.
So the point is, you can find some time to do some of these things, whether it's on your lunch break. I go walking on my lunch break every day. I'll go walk for 45 minutes, get some sunshine, listen to a podcast, and then go back to work. So you can work this stuff into your quote unquote noise in your life.
Yeah. I think the important part of the mindfulness piece of it too is really just finding ways that you could decompress, but decompress in like a healthy way. So not decompress by scrolling through Instagram, or whatever on your phone for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But something that actually is going to be beneficial to kind of your mind and that will help you find a way to refresh. That's what's important about that stuff.
Unless you only follow pages that are full of pictures of puppies, you're probably going to get more anxiety out of social media than you are anything. So my advice is delete those apps and get a book.
Well, the point is what you said, right? Life is busy. And sometimes when it gets busy, you've got to find ways to be able to kind of take a break, decompress so that you can refocus on whatever needs to be done or whatever the goal is that you're striving towards, right? And keep some of those things in mind and in the forefront of your mind so that you can stay on the right path.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Now, you're either going to pay for your health now or you're going to pay for it later.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And going to the gym and being able to bench press 400 pounds is not the same as taking a holistic approach to your overall health.
Yeah.
And that includes mental and spiritual and all that stuff. So while bench pressing and lifting weights is not bad, anabolic exercise is scientifically proven that you need that shit. You need resistance training, especially as we get older for our joints and our muscles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to it than just how many plates can you put on the stinking bar.
Yeah. Well, I saw a funny meme the other day, and the older guys that listen to the podcast will get this, and the younger guys probably won't, but it's fucking coming for you. And remember when we used to refer to our knees as left and right instead of bad and good?
Yeah.
Right.
You're talking to the guy that's been hobbling for a month now, which I actually, I meant to text Katie earlier. Sorry if I forget to tell you, but I actually jogged for the first time in over a month today.
Right on.
I was doing like 2-minute jog, 1-minute walk, and I did that for 30 minutes. So it's getting a little bit better. Don't know if I'll be doing that 5K anytime soon, but I'm getting back.
Right on.
One thing that I had written down, man, and this is a little abstract, but I was listening to this show the other day from Ed Milet, and he was talking about the power of now. And I just started really thinking about that on my drive home, and I was really reflecting, and I was going, you know what, man? Being in the present, being here right now, instead of always looking forward or living in the past. I heard this quote the other day that said, time spent on regret is time wasted. So stop living in the past. It's already done. And there's only so much you can do about the future. Just be here right now.
Yeah.
Be in this room, be on this podcast, be on that trail that you're walking or whatever it might be.
I fucking sucked at that.
It's hard.
Wholesale.
It is.
In my 20s and 30s. And probably really until I made the decision that I was going to retire, that has always been a struggle for me because I've always been future focused.
There's always a carrot.
I've always had some bigger objective that I'm striving towards, and my focus was always on that. And it was very difficult for me to be present. And I'll tell you right now, man, I regret that to a certain extent because when I look back on my career in the Air Force, there were things that I did that were really fucking cool. And there were accomplishments and achievements that I had that were really fucking cool. And I don't think that I really got to enjoy those to the extent that I could have if I could have learned how to be present earlier in my life.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, great. Yeah. Give me the patch. Give me the accolade. Give me the award. I've got to get over here and do this next. Right.
Yeah.
Or I've got to. And I was always so future focused that it made it very, and that's a regret for me in some respects because, I remember my weapons school graduation and the night, and when we got done with the graduation stuff, like I had all these family and friends around me, and it was so hard for me to just enjoy that moment and that time with them and express my gratitude for them being there with me and just recognizing like what I just went through. And in some ways, the support that I had from some of those people for being there for 6 months and the stuff that they had gone through to allow me to do that, I miss some of that because all I was thinking about was fuck, I'm going back to a squadron that hasn't had a patch in 2 months or 2 years, you know, and we're changing all these game plans, and I've got all this shit to teach, and I'm already in my mind going, how the fuck am I going to do this? Where do I want to start? How am I going to make this work when I get back there? Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a big one, man.
You know, there's some science behind, you know, we know about dopamine and cortisol and some of these other hormones that kind of give us these, it's the rewards internally to yourself. And there's some science behind the pursuit of something gives you more of that than the actual achievement does. So when you're handed that patch or that diploma or that award, that plaque, it's like, okay, great. You know, you're just being recognized for all the hard work and the process that you went through, but the process is the more rewarding part of it. And that's the more, I guess, the more tangible dopamine release, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty of it. But you know, that what you were talking about, that's almost a toxic trait for some of us who are maybe high achievers or overachievers or who are always chasing something. And I remember when, it hasn't been too long ago when I released No New Lessons was my first book. And I mean, we're making this big book launch, and I'm throwing out stuff on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube and all over the place and trying to market and get people to buy it and leave reviews and all this shit. And no shit, man, like 4 days later, boom, bestseller. And I cried for like 5 seconds. And then it was like, okay, now what's next?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really just sit there and
enjoy the moment
and really enjoy it. Now, I mean, I was the only one up in the house. I was by myself.
Yeah.
So I didn't have, there was no ticker tape parade. There was no candles. There was no, you know, cheers with a beer or anything like that. But I could have really just kicked back in my chair and just kind of reminisced a little bit over, man, that was 3 years of really hard work, and look at it, you know, it actually paid off, and just really swam in that
process.
Yeah, exactly, man. Just really appreciate the experience for what it was. But instead I was like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to me. So that's what I've learned, you know, especially now that life has slowed down a little bit. Why that mindfulness is so important, that decompression piece is so important, because there were times too where I was so future focused that I sacrificed my health. I sacrificed taking care of myself because I was pushing towards, you know, this specific goal. And like we've talked about on previous podcasts, man, in retrospect, I didn't have to.
Yeah.
I just didn't prioritize very well.
Yeah.
You know,
and you get caught up in it, and you know, I believe that's natural. And it takes somebody who's extremely self-aware, to be able to recognize, oh, whoa, hold up, I need to pull back a little bit, and have some me time. You know, maybe go for that walk and not study the 3-1. Maybe I just put on some Motley Crue and just zone out for a little bit.
And it doesn't mean that you're not still striving towards whatever that goal is, but that you kind of reprioritize things to make sure that you're giving yourself the time you need to do what you need to do to take care of yourself in that process as well. That's all.
No, that's good stuff, man. What else you got?
Well, that kind of leads into the next one I was going to talk about, which is self-awareness and just emotional skills or intelligence. And I know we haven't talked about emotional intelligence yet, but we will soon. But, you know, being able to understand your own emotions, being able to empathize with other people and what they're going through. You know, it's important to maintain healthy relationships, which goes back to the relationship piece before. But it's also huge for personal growth, right? That self-awareness piece, being introspective, taking some self-inspection, thinking about, okay, man, this is where I'm out of balance. These are some things like if I could have done that a little better when I was younger, then I would have made some better decisions in those times where I was striving towards something, to be able to go, all right, I'm going to take the pause and really enjoy this for the next 30 minutes. Or, you know, I'm going to make sure that I carve out 30 minutes if that's all I can do today, to go for a run or to do some push-ups or sit-ups or whatever, you know, instead of just drinking Jack and Coke while I power through something else and then turn it into fat Jason.
Well, you know, we talk so much about humility too, man. And I think there's another side to that coin, and that's pride. But it's okay to be proud of yourself for the accomplishment that you had.
Sure.
You know, not to be quote unquote a proud person in the negative sense that we sometimes talk about it. But if you accomplish something that's significant, be proud of that. Allow yourself to be happy and smile about it, man, and rejoice in that for a second. Show the joy that you have from within.
No, that's good. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too, because I think there's a big difference between being self-confident or versus being ego driven.
Yeah, we'll get into that in second half.
And you want to be confident about yourself. You want to believe that you have the ability to do whatever it is you're trying to do. I mean, that's important. That's motivating.
Well, if you don't have the belief in yourself, then you're never going to get there.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyways,
no, that's good, man. That's gosh, this is getting a lot deeper than I thought it was going to get. I thought we were going to talk about like the car that I drive doesn't matter. Which it really doesn't. No. But you know what? I'm proud of my $100 car.
I like the
In fact, just today, I sent Katie a picture just a minute ago. Somebody had driven a Ferrari and had the top off and everything. This thing was fucking awesome, man.
Yeah.
It was like cherry red and had a 69th hat in the passenger seat.
Oh, nice.
So Ferrari parked here and my car parked here. So I took a picture of both of them and I sent it to Katie. Here's a $100 car versus a $100,000 car in the same parking lot. And no kidding, like I go to work some days and I park in between a $100,000 Volvo and a $100,000 Jaguar with a $100,000 Raptor pickup truck in front of me. And here I am in my little $100 hoopty. It's awesome. I'm proud of that shit, man.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. What else?
The last one that I had was just being true to yourself and acting with integrity. Which just goes back to that whole thing that we talk about just about every podcast, which is the self-inspection to defining personal values and then practicing those values. So, I mean, dude, if you're not going to say, if you're not going to define values for yourself and then hold yourself accountable to them, then it's going to be really difficult to lead any kind of a meaningful life in my perspective. So yeah,
no, I think that bleeds right over into character too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big
to a degree. That's gonna be a big piece of your character and how you carry yourself.
Absolutely,
and all that. My final one was going to be positive mental attitude. I think that matters, man. Yeah. I really think that matters because
growth mindset.
I'll give you an example. Katie and I we've been signed up to do this Rugged Maniac obstacle course for a little while now, and I was a little bummed because of my knee, but I was going to power through it. I was going to figure out a way. If I had to freaking shoot steroids in my knee, I'm running this race with Katie, right? Because it's more about her and seeing her accomplish something and have that confidence and belief in herself. Do I doubt for a second that I can go out there and do the Rugged Maniac? Not for a second. I will do this. I probably do it on a bum knee and not have any problems. But for her, it was going to be a big deal, right? Well, they canceled it. And so I said, okay, no big deal. We'll just shift our focus. And now our goal, our target is going to be the Spartan race in November. So we got 10 months to train up for this thing. And immediately she goes, oh, I don't know if I can do a Spartan race. I said, well, not with that shitty attitude, you can't.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, you're right. I know. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about though. If you think you can't do it, you're absolutely, who is it? Henry Ford said, if you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're positive about something and say, I can do this, and I'll even do you one better. If you say, I will do this, that's a positive affirmation. And that gives you the motivation. And then you just have to back that up with a little bit of discipline. You can accomplish anything you want to.
Yeah.
Fucking redneck from Alabama over here can be a best-selling author.
Yeah.
If he puts his mind to it and he works fucking hard and he gets the right people on his team to help him out and edit shit and turn my redneck speak into proper English and learn how to tell a good story and all that kind of stuff, you can do these things, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So be positive about it.
Agreed.
Woo. I'm out of breath, man. What else you got?
That's it for the things that matter.
Golly.
On my list.
All right.
What about things that don't matter? You want to kick that one off?
Oh, geez. Well, the car you drive probably doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
The pants that you wear. I mean, all these material things. And we talked about this a little bit in 4-letter F words. We're talking about being fake.
Yeah.
Right. And some of the things that I think that we get wrapped around, particularly, it's really easy to point at the material things. Like, I'll use females, for example. I think there's a large portion of females that get wrapped around their looks a lot. And males too, don't get me wrong, males too, but you see this more, at least in society, it's propagated more towards females about what your hair look like and the color of your hair and how much makeup you're wearing and what your body image looks like and all this kind of stuff. Not so much for the men's side of it. It's a little more, I guess those terms are a little more loosely defined for males in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But in the end, man, does it really matter?
Well, I think for men in society, it's more how much money do you make? What's the job you have? What kind of car do you drive?
Status?
What shit do you own? Right? That's what society pushes as that makes you a successful man. Is how big is your house, or how nice is the car you drive, and how much money do you make every year, and whatever.
Well, and we've said before that you define success. At least that's the way I see it. I think that you define success, and you and I have talked off camera. Your version of success is different than mine, and that's okay.
Yeah,
it's an individual journey, and
it's
and
completely up to you.
Yeah, go for it, man. The fact that I drive $100 car, does that matter? No, because you know what it does is it allows me freedom in some other places to use the money that I might be paying for a really expensive car to be able to go and do some other things.
Yeah.
Maybe go travel with my wife, or, buy her a nice present, or treat myself to something, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, but that aligns with my values.
That's right.
Because one of my values was freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny too, because you see the lists that come out every year too, like about the professions that men have that are like the most whatever. And it's always like doctor and pilot and all these other things. And it's like, dude, it's so fucking stupid. Just whatever.
Yeah.
Like, again, this just goes back to, you have to do you. You have to define what that is for you, what success is for you, what you like to say happiness. I like to say fulfillment.
Yeah.
What that is going to be for you, and move out on it, and fuck the rest of it, man. Fuck the noise, fuck the cultural norms, fuck society. Like, just do whatever it is that
man.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to bring you happiness and fulfillment.
Well, at the end of the day, man, even Tom Brady had to hang him up.
Yeah.
You're not going to be an NFL Hall of Fame quarterback forever.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to find something that brings you fulfillment.
Yeah.
And you know what? When you're 80 years old and you can't throw the football anymore, are you gonna be peaked in high school Jim, who talks about his glory days 40 freaking years ago? Or are you going to be the guy that talked about, man, I did this really cool shit yesterday?
Yeah. Don't be Uncle Rico.
Yeah. So that's, I think again, man, we can take this back to being present, being here and now, and having awareness of what's going on around you. And, maybe the car that you drive isn't that important. I've had this conversation with 20-year-olds who are paying $800 a month for car payments and working part-time jobs.
Yeah.
Why are, dude, you are intentionally putting yourself in poverty.
Yeah.
Because you want to drive a cool car.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So the material stuff is easy to point out. What else? What's something else that doesn't matter?
I put toxic relationships. And, this was something that I probably didn't recognize very well when I was younger. But you've talked about it a lot on the podcast, and it's in your books, and that's that emotional equity piece.
Yeah.
And, trust is one of my big values, and a lot of times I would overextend myself, and I'm an overfunctioner too. So for the people that I really care about, I would overextend myself a lot of times in life for different people, only to be taken advantage of and never to get anything in return. Which it's not that it has to be reciprocal necessarily, but there does need to be some kind of give and take, right? And so I would just say, man, if you're in a relationship, especially for the younger guys, like right now, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's a manipulator, or like, guys, if you're young and you're dating a girl who expects you to read her mind and know what she's thinking or feeling,
Katie,
and you're sitting there, and you're like going, well, why is she pissed off? And then she's, well, you should know, dude, run for the fucking hills, just go.
She got just cray.
Like, it's not worth it, man, because. And it's with friendships too, and recognize too, like we've talked about, that some of these things are going to have seasons, and that group and be intentional. I mean, it was different for us, I think, a little bit in the military, because you're kind of surrounded by type A personalities and people that have, in a lot of ways, the same ideas, values, drive, initiative that you do. So it's kind of easy to fit into that puzzle. I think it's a little more difficult outside of an environment like that sometimes, but that's why it's so important, which we talked about too, like your 1 of 5 project. You have to be intentional about who you circle yourself with, right? You really do. You have to be intentional about it. You really have to evaluate relationships sometimes and go, dude, is this really a relationship that's helping me? Are these people supportive? Do they get where I'm trying to go? Are they going to be in the arena with me? Are they going to be there for me? And if the answer is no, then let it go, right? Like, just, it's time to move on. It's time to find those people in your life that will be there and do those things for you.
Yeah. Is it that we used to use something in the military, and I forget exactly what we used to say, but it was something like stop, start, continue. When we were looking at processes, we're either going to start this process, we're going to stop this process, or we're going to continue the process that we have right now. And, you can almost look at relationships the same way when you're talking about your circle of five. Are these guys helping me get where I want to go? Are they holding me back from where I want to go? Or are they just kind of neutral NPCs, non-player characters in my life, and when you get to where you can start to filter some of that stuff out, then I really think that, and I had that written down. I had a note under here under where you were talking about relationships. I had, the circle of five and our circles of influence, and not only who are allowing to influence us, but who we're influencing, and keeping in mind our character and being self-aware and in the present. So, because you never know when you're going to influence someone. I could have influenced somebody today when I went into Fry's and didn't speak to a person. I just went in there, grabbed my sandwich, and got the hell out. But maybe somebody saw me as grumpy because I just had a blank expression on my face. You just never know. So I think if you can be aware to some of that stuff, particularly when you're talking about the toxic relationships, when you can start to weed some of that stuff out and really look at it for what it is. Like it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. I mean, it just is what it is sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you can recognize it and be like, dude, I'm not getting anything out of this. Like, go back to is it Stephen F. Covey talking about the bank account, the emotional bank account, man.
Yeah.
I'm depositing into this account and you are not.
Yeah.
I'm closing the account.
Is taking withdrawals.
I'm closing the account, man. I'm not getting ROI, so I'm out.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes.
It is.
And we've had the discussion on here about putting up barriers and trying to wall in some of those relationships to a degree, and it's tough.
Yeah.
So especially with close people who you've been close with for a really long time, that it turns out, 15 years later, the relationship's just not what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah. So anyways, just don't be afraid to let those things go and move on.
Yeah. How about something like, in the next section, when we start talking about ego a little bit, we'll talk about competitiveness and everything, but how valuable is it in your life? How valuable is it going to be 20 years from now that you proved somebody wrong?
It's not.
Exactly. That's shit that don't matter, man.
It doesn't matter.
Makes you feel good for about 5 seconds, and that's it. And
well, yeah, totally. I mean, I think as a society in general, we like to play the blame game, right? There always has to be blame assigned for any wrongdoings, things like that. And there's appropriate times and places to do that, and for accountability and things like that. But at the end of the day, none of it really probably fucking matters that much, right?
Well,
the fact is that we're where we're at, and the question is, how do we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, if you want a good lesson in it or whatever, just go watch CNN or Fox News for an hour, and they're always trying to do these gotcha questions and prove somebody wrong or show that he did this wrongdoing. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, man.
Yeah,
I mean, the people that like the guy are going to like the guy. The people that don't like the guy are not going to like the guy. And there's maybe 10% of the people in the middle who go, nah, So in the end, proving somebody wrong is probably not worth your energy.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's better just to let some of those things go most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Never pass up an opportunity to shut the fuck up.
That's right.
Yeah. What else?
I had a shame or regret without debriefing and reflecting on integrity and values. And this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier. Like, dude, you can't live in the past. Like, if you're just going to sit there and beat yourself up for stupid decisions that you've made or things that have happened to you in the past, then it's going to be really difficult for you to move forward. So my advice in that is, instead of dwelling on past mistakes or feeling ashamed about something, reflect on it, debrief it, right? Learn from it, and then use what you learn moving forward. And by debriefing and reflecting on your actions, you're going to be able to align yourself with the value system. So here, I'm going to get mean for a second. When we had young punks in the squadron, and they'd be like, "Oh, CAS, we just got the intel brief on the Su-30 MKK," and the fears in their eyes. I'm like, dude, fuck you, right? Like, you're an American trained fighter pilot. When you hit a merge with an adversary aircraft, you win. By default, you win. And if you can't win, then fuck you. You probably deserve to die.
Yeah.
Right?
Not your day.
If you've been listening to this podcast and you're not learning how to be self-inspective or self-reflective or build self-awareness, and you haven't taken the time to define your personal values, then fuck you, dude. You're just going to stay in the same fucking pattern that you've always been in. You're going to keep rolling into the same mistakes over and over and over again until you figure this shit out and you define that stuff for yourself. And then you start aligning your actions and your behaviors and your thoughts with it.
Yeah.
not much is going to change. I'm just here to tell you that. Sorry.
You're 100% right, man. And you can talk about it all day.
Yeah.
I was just having this conversation with a guy last night about, we can talk about this for an hour and a half.
Chat.
We were on the phone for 90 minutes last night, and I'm trying to coach him up and everything. And at the end of it, I'm like, dude, we can talk about this every night of every week for the next however long you want to do it, for 90 minutes at a whack. But until you actually do something, like, it takes action, man. You're going to have to put your tennis shoes on. You're going to have to sit in a dark room by yourself with a notebook and write some shit down. You're going to have to do some reflection. You're going to have to look at yourself in the mirror. I mean, the rubber has to meet the road at some point.
And I understand that this can be an uncomfortable process. It's been an uncomfortable process for me.
It is for everyone.
It continues to be uncomfortable for me at times. But dude, you got to do the work. And if you're not going to do the work, then you're just, you're not going to get any traction. You're not going to get any movement.
And I mean, we're not talking about going outside and digging a trench, right? This is not necessarily physical labor. This is you spending some time inside your own head.
Yeah, it's a mental exercise.
And this is you being honest with yourself. And again, I mean, all of those things that I just mentioned, those are the things that are going to matter in 30 years.
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, when you're 80 years old and you're laying there in your diapers, it's going to be your family that's there and the memories that you share with them. And if you're an asshole, you don't want them bringing that up when you're 80 years old. I don't want them telling.
Or nobody in the room with you.
I don't want them telling all the other nursing home people, don't go in his room. He's an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a cool thing that I read in a book a while back, and it was this guy was mentoring his son. His son was maybe 10 or 12 years old, and he took him to a cemetery, and he stood him in front of a headstone of whoever, doesn't matter. And they just stood there for a few minutes, and finally the little kid's like, Dad, what's up? Why are we here? And he says, you see those two dates right there? That's the date that he was born and the date that he died. And the kid goes, yeah, got it. He goes, but that dash in the middle is what matters. Right. So the whole chapter was talking about working on your dash.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff, like, we're all born and we're all going to die. We're all on a finite timeline of life here. But what you do in the middle, that's the shit that matters, man. And that's the kind of stuff that we're getting down to.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Oh, the last one, dude, I had was bravado, ego, and singularly driven, focused goals. So we talk a lot about goals, and I'm not saying don't create goals for yourself. And this actually ties nicely into and segues nicely into the other question that we had to answer, which is, hey man, if I am struggling with ego or bravado or things like that, like what do I do to minimize it? Right. Yeah. So here's the deal. It goes back to what we've already talked about. The issue with singularly driven goals, what the issue can be is when that goal becomes all consuming and it starts to affect other aspects of your life, relationships, being able to take care of yourself, things like that. Doesn't mean it's not a good goal or an attainable goal, but the way that you're going about getting to it, you may need to adjust, right?
I feel like we just talked about this when we were talking about you going to weapons school.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to single you out as an example or anything, but everything you just mentioned right there was in that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just going to weapons school, right? It was getting into the IPUG and finishing my IPUG and then performing in the squadron.
This is a years long process.
So that I could go off the base number 1 for weapons school, and then it was WIC spin up, and then it was being gone for 6 months while I got my dick kicked in for, every day in a debrief. So, I mean, it's the balance piece of that. So it's good to have goals, but when your focus on that becomes so singularly driven that other things in your life start to decay because of it, then you may need to have a little self-awareness and be able to pivot or reprioritize or readjust a little bit so that those other things, when you get to that goal, you don't lose all the rest of the shit getting there.
Yeah.
Anyways, I lost my train of thought because I was going to say something about it, something we had said on a previous podcast, but if it comes back to me, I'll say it. So,
well, you mentioned the key word in that whole thing, and it was balance.
Balance.
That's like the key takeaway of everything. Ego in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. The way that we frame it a lot of times on this podcast, we talk about it almost in a negative light a lot of times.
Yeah, we do.
And that's for a reason, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to give it a name, and we called it ego. All right. But but ego in and of itself, I mean, it can be a significant driving force in your life.
That's
and,
right.
and a significant source of confidence and really kind of project your abilities out to whatever it is you're trying to attain. But the key piece of it that I think you mentioned there was balance, right? And that takes a little bit of awareness of sometimes because we're all guilty of it, right? Especially people who grew up the way that we did. Of it's just this constant carrot to chase. There's always something else to get. You get the 2-flug upgrade. Fuck, now I got to get the 4-flug upgrade. Shit, now I got to go to IPO. So there's this never ending list of things that you have to check off. And I remember, it was almost like a switch flipped in my brain where I went, dude, I'm done with that. I'm not doing that shit anymore.
Yeah.
And it was when I was at Fort Campbell. I was on a 9-month deployment, and I was gone. I was sitting over in Fob Salerno in Afghanistan, and I remember talking to Katie on the phone that day and going, "Did the Air Force became a job to me in that moment? The Air Force became a job instead of a lifestyle, and that's a big difference." Unless you've been in it, unless you've been in something like that, maybe you can't understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the military, the Air Force, the fighter squadron, the cockpits, that's a lifestyle, man.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we've talked about it. We get a new name for crying out loud. By the way, what was your name?
Jason.
Oh, damn it.
Nice try.
But anyways, I remember the moment that happened for me. And from that point on, I told every commander, I told you this, you may not remember it, but I told every commander, I said, dude, I'll give you 100% of 100% required. If it's required for me to be here for 16 or 17 hours to teach Chucklehead how to fly and drop bombs, that's what you need to expect. If it's not, and I'm not on the schedule, guess what? I got an iPhone and you've got my number.
Yeah.
Call me. I'll be here in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So, and not one time, not once in all those years did a commander call me.
Yeah.
Not one time.
Yeah, that's good, man. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's the balance piece of it, right? Because ego is important for all the things that you just named. I mean, dude, we all have egos. There isn't a day that I didn't step to a jet and think that I wasn't the baddest motherfucker in the valley.
You have to,
and it's part of it. And it does bring self-confidence and can be a positive for sure. But when you let it get out of balance and it starts to lead to arrogance or selfishness or disregard for other people, then that's when it becomes an issue, right? That's when that ego and bravado becomes an issue. And I will tell you that my experience in the fighter squadron was the dudes with the biggest egos were also the most insecure motherfuckers in the squadron. And typically they put the big ego on because they were so afraid of being wrong. They wanted everybody to be afraid of them.
Hangman.
Or they wanted everybody to believe that they couldn't be wrong. And that's a bunch of bullshit, right? And that's what you don't want to get to, and it's part of that too is what we've talked about before, which is sometimes when your ego gets so big, then your identity gets rolled up in whatever that's about. So how many fighter pilots do you know who, still have the license plate that says, F-15E Wizzo on the back of it or whatever, right? So
what does your license plate say?
Well, it says AJ and CAS, but that's just because that's all that'll fit.
That's one.
And AJ's is Alicia's initials. So, but you know what I mean? And I mean, I see it when I drive to the airport, S737 captain or whatever. And I'm just like, come on, man.
Freaking dude.
Yeah. Or, the guys that come, it's funny coming over to the airlines because there's still guys that like want to go by their call signs. And it's like, dude, you need to let it fucking go. It's okay. Right. Like,
lucky for me, I work in an environment where I still get to be my alter ego occasionally, but I could see where it would be weird in an environment like yours.
In healthy doses, I think ego can provide a sense of self-assurance and belief in abilities, which can be very beneficial in pursuing goals and overcoming challenges. And that goes back to, when we went into combat, we had to believe we were the best, right? Yeah. You just have to have those thoughts about yourself. But when it becomes an outward, and dude, it's okay. I am a bad motherfucker. I'm very fucking talented. I can fly the hell out of an airplane. I don't project that to everybody around me. You know what I mean? I don't walk around going, I'm the best fucking pilot here. Do you have a question about that? Right? That's the difference. Right? That's the difference.
That's
so you can think those things about yourself and have that self-confidence. But when you start to outwardly project that stuff, that's when it starts to turn into that bravado and ego that we don't want a part of.
I'm laughing because there's literally a sign over here on my left that says,
Yeah, my kids got me that.
I'm a pilot, so while it's possible that I could be wrong, it's very unlikely.
Yeah.
So
Which is true, by the way.
So how do you what's the difference between God and a fighter pilot? Is God doesn't think he's a fighter pilot?
That's right.
Now, you know what, I was saying this, I was writing this in a story that I wrote not too long ago, and I wrote in there, when you're poking your nose into a fight at 500 miles an hour with no reverse option, you have to know that you have your shit together.
Yeah, you do.
Now, there is a fine line between cockiness and confidence. And that's that line that like Robin Olds talks about in his really famous quote about fighter pilots and attitude. There's a line between cockiness and confidence. And sometimes it's blurry, sometimes it's gray, and it's, you know, and it's okay sometimes to step across that line and go back and forth a little bit and flirt with it some. How many times have you gotten into it in the bar at a roll call or a Friday night bro call or whatever, and you're like, I kicked your ass in BFM today, you know, that kind of stuff. And I mean, all that's kind of raz, you know, kind of ha funny, but at the same time, it's kind of like, let's go do it again.
Yeah.
You know, bet, put your money where your mouth is. Bombing for quarters on a Friday afternoon, you know, out of the range or something.
If you want to use the fighter pilot community example again too, right? Here's the difference. The guy that has an ego in check and the guy that doesn't. The guy that has his ego in check is the guy who believes he's the best, is striving to be the best, but admits his mistakes in the debrief. And the guy that has so much ego that the ego that we don't want is the guy who's trying to pin it on number 2 or number 3 or number 4, or trying to make excuses for why things went sideways instead of just going, dudes, I fucked up the flow call. That was my bad.
Sorry, man.
That's it. That's the difference, right? So, you know, the ego piece, when it gets out of control, is when it lacks humility. When you no longer have the ability to go, I fucked it up and I made a mistake, dude, you've gone too far. And if that's what's going on for you, reel it the fuck in.
Well, going back to what we were saying earlier, the key word in that whole thing was balance. And I think that humility is the balance to the ego piece of it. Right? Yeah. You can have the ego and you can have that bravado.
Humility
and you can
is
have
the
that
balance.
You can walk with your chest out and your chin up. That's fine. As long as you got the yin to the yang sitting over here, and that's called humility. And you go, dudes, I screwed that up. I said crank left. We should have cranked right.
Right.
My bad.
Yeah. Well, and when we talked as weapons officer about humble, approachable, credible, there's a reason that humble comes first. Because if you're the guy that's beating his chest all the time and can't be wrong, you're not fucking approachable.
Yeah.
You know, and you may be credible in the jet up until the point where you fuck it away and you try to hide it and everybody knows you fucked it away and now you've lost credibility. So the humility comes first. The humility is what allows you to be approachable and what lends to credibility, because you're the guy that's in the debrief room going, hey dudes, I'm your patch. And guess what? I made the fucking wrong call today. Yeah. And it happens. Yeah. We're all human. My bad. And here's the lesson from it. Right.
It happened.
Everybody learns.
It happened today. I was doing a tactical intercept sim with an 06, teaching a young captain. 06 is the instructor, and in the debrief, he goes, I completely screwed that up. I mean, the guy's been in the Air Force for 25 years, man. He's got 4,000 hours flying, and he's like, yep, I screwed that up. My bad.
Yeah. It happens.
Sorry you didn't get the training that we were here to get you learning today, and I screwed that up. Yeah. My bad. It happens every day. I screw something up every day, and sometimes you just laugh about it and you move on. Because when you get to that point, I think, at least this has been my experience, when you get to the point where you can just laugh about it and say, guys, I fucked that up. My bad. People are just like, hey, no problem, man. Let's do it again. You know, and you reset and you go. And man, you could take that into just about any facet of your life. If you just say, Katie and I talk about ourselves being the Griswolds all the time, because if shit's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong to us. Yeah. But you learn to laugh about it because life is a comedy show.
Well, and dude, the credibility piece, right? Credibility isn't you're always right. Right? That's a double-sided coin. Credibility is you know your shit and you get it right most of the time, but when you fuck it up or you don't know the right answer, you ask for help or you admit your fault. That's credibility.
How about saying, I don't know, but I know where to find the answer?
Yeah. Or
I mean, that's also valid.
Or how about saying, I don't know how the best way to attack this problem. What do you guys fucking think?
Yeah.
You know, so anyways.
Well, take this into what we like to talk about on the show, you know, and let's bring it back to Be One, Change One real quick. And I got a phone call or a text message the other day from a guy that I haven't talked to in a really long time that says, dude, I know we don't talk a lot, but I need some help. Can you help me out? Yeah, man. And in that conversation that day, I told him, he says that he's listened to every episode. And I told the guy, I said, if you've listened to every episode, then you've heard me say this before. When you get to a point in your life where you can say, I don't know, or I messed up, then you opened a door to a whole new world.
Yeah,
man.
Superpower.
And It is. Humility is a superpower. And this guy, over the last week, we've had a couple of conversations, and I mean, a text message chain is as long as this freaking room, going back and forth and really helping him. And I think he's opening his aperture. Now he's got to put rubber on pavement, and he's going to have to do some things.
Do the work.
But at least he started. At least he raised his hand and says, man, here I am. I'm 33 years old and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Good. I can work with that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Some other things just kind of related to that. I think the bottom line is, dude, there's cultural norms that we have around what men are supposed to be that I think are mostly false. And we've talked about this stuff on the podcast before too. But some of them, just for examples, the cultural context and the cultural norms that we have is, we've talked about this emotional suppression, right? Mm-hmm. Men aren't supposed to show emotion, or we're not supposed to express vulnerability or say when we're wrong, or right. And all that shit does is contribute to you having an inflated ego and being completely out of fucking touch with yourself. And it also makes you very difficult to manage and maintain. If you can't be vulnerable with your partner, it's going to be tough to maintain that relationship over time.
Well, I can speak to this from personal experience with my kids, because my kids won't come to me with some things. They will intentionally. I wrote about this in my book, Work Hard, Don't Suck. In the very beginning, I tend to be more of a blank face, resting bitch face kind of guy, because I'm looking for the problem. I want to solve the problem, right?
Yeah.
Rather than put my arms around them and tell them I love them and tell them it'll be okay. And that's one of my faults. It's a big fault, and I need to work on that. Now, I'm not like that with Katie, which is weird, because you would think that if I'm not like that with one person, that I could be that way with someone else. Yeah. But for whatever reason, I have this, I put this shield up in front of my kids because I want them to see that fucking dad eats glass, man. He's a hardcore motherfucker. I want them to see me as strong and the leader, and waves just crash off of me. That's the image that I want to give to them. But at the same time, I really need to be giving them man, he's a softie too.
Yeah.
Dad's a big teddy bear, he'll hug us every now and then.
Yeah. Well, and not just that, but you know what? Like, there's times in your life that you couldn't have done things or gotten through things without the support of Katie.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. So the waves can crash against you, but sometimes they're going to knock you flat on your ass too.
That's
right.
True.
And so showing that vulnerability and showing, that sometimes, hey guys, we need support in our life. We need people around us that can help pick us up, because sometimes things get really bad and dark, and it takes more than just me and I to get through it.
Yeah.
Those are important pieces. And that kind of rolls into the other thing that I was going to talk about, which is just those pressures to conform to traditional masculinity, right? So like the whole man card thing cracks me up, dude. Because fuck you. Like, who are you to tell me what I am as a man? Yeah. You don't fucking know me, And I was flying with this guy the other day. Great fucking dude. We had a really good time. And this dude's a big cat. He's in his late 40s now. He told me that he'd recently lost some weight, but like, you can tell this dude, he played rugby for a very long time, right? Big dude. He's a big dude. He's in good shape. He's one of those guys that you look at and you can just tell he's got a lot of solid muscle on him, right? And he was telling me about this story about he's at the gym and he's got this guy that, he kind of had made friends with through the course of the gym. And this is back when he was still playing rugby, I think. And he's got like 450 pounds on the squat rack, and he's squatting, and he had lost some weight. And this guy came up to him, who was also pretty buff, I guess, but was a little portly too, more of a square than a whatever.
Hey, round is a shape.
And he came up to him and he goes, "Hey man, have you lost some weight?" And he's like, "Yeah, I lost a little bit of weight, and the guy's made some comment to him like, "You don't look like a man anymore," and the dude's like, "Well, then get over here and fucking squat this 450 pounds and show me who's a fucking man, dude." Right? It's just, that shit just cracks me up. So anyways, dude, there's stereotypes out there. And I think a lot of us feel pressured, especially when we're younger, to conform to those stereotypes and expectations, right? What's my body count? What's,
how many tattoos do I have?
Right. What kind of, I'm paying $800 a month for a car that I can't afford to drive because there's this image I want to project of myself, right? Just like we talked about. Knock it the fuck off. It's just over exaggeration. It's just going to lead to you thinking that you're more important than you really are. And it's just bravado. It's bravado without any backup. And so, like we've talked about, man, if you want to be awesome, If you want to be a great man, be a great friend, be a great
Yeah.
dad, be a great lover, you know, be great at what you do, you know, focus on
Yeah.
those things. Don't worry about all this other bullshit that the world tells us we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because guess what? We're all different, you know, and we all have different desires and we all have different traits. You know, some men are more feminine than other men.
Mhm.
Some guys are very athletic, some guys aren't.
Yeah.
You know, some guys can swing a bat, some guys can't. It doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
Like, just do you.
I love how all this shit just ties together.
Yeah, man.
It's like
But
big old knot.
you know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
It's just that stuff.
Well,
Just fuck
that guy that
everybody else. I'm on a roll today.
I'm just gonna get out of the way. That dude that's squatting 450, dude. I can't squat 450, but I can cook a good steak.
Yeah,
And maybe that motherfucker can't.
Right.
Maybe he microwaves his chicken.
and
You know what I'm saying? So
and that's how we should define man.
It would be really hard to create an objective, comprehensive scorecard to define what that is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes down to the stuff that we've been talking about, what matters and what doesn't matter. And everything that you were just listing was all that shit that I put in the fake column. You know, what car do you drive? How much can you squat? I mean, who gives a fuck, man?
Yeah,
I'm a good husband to my wife.
That's right.
You know, and she knows that I'm not out running around on her and doing that. You know, I've traveled around the world. I've been on more TDYs than I can count. I've lived for Vegas in 6 fucking weeks on the strip.
Yeah.
Right. And not once has my wife second guessed me. Not once have I stepped out of bounds. Not once. She's gone on trips. And these are the things that I want to be remembered for.
Yeah.
Not, well, he ran a Spartan race in 30 minutes. Who gives a fuck, dude?
Yeah. Well, and it all comes back to values, right? So, because let's be honest, there is a celebration of dominance and power. Like it's like we talked in Top Gun, right? So here's Maverick. He's the hero. Can't accept any accountability for his actions. Has a complete disrespect for authority. Has no ability to manage personal or professional relationships.
Hey, what was that guy's name, by the way?
Maverick. Well,
Yeah.
come on. That's sorry. Well,
Yeah.
Paul Mitchell.
Pete Mitchell.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's
Paul
two.
Mitchell's hair. There you go, Maverick. You're not a fucking man. You know, but there's all these things, right? But that's what we get projected to us. That's the dude that we're all supposed to strive to be, right?
Yeah.
And it's he's stuck in his past, can't deal with the things that he went through, whatever, right? And so it's just like, dudes, the bottom line is get to know yourself and figure out what matters to you, okay? And then once you figure out what that is and you define your values, all that external noise around you will fade because now you're on a path. And it doesn't matter what the stands say when you're in the arena and you're marred by blood, sweat, dust, and tears, and you're doing the work. All the noise behind you in the stands for all of those motherfuckers who, well, I'm a man, but they're not in the arena doing something about it. Doesn't matter.
Well, you shoulda, or
Yeah.
whatever, man.
I mean, Brene Brown, one of the
Yeah.
best things that she says sometimes is she goes, you know, when she first got popular and kind of famous, a lot of people would come up to her and she would, you know, they would say certain things to her and it would be hurtful or impactful. And she started to realize that, you know what, if you're not in the arena with me, if you're not doing the fucking work, then your opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing it. So how do you know? What do you have to say about any of this?
That's why I say there's things that matter and things that don't matter, and that shit don't matter.
Yeah. So there you go. Put that on the list of things that don't matter.
Yeah. You know, when you get feedback from someone, like in that example, I learned this a long time ago. First of all, consider the source. All right. That's the very first thing I do. When I get a negative review on my book or the podcast or whatever it is, first thing I do is I consider the source. Are you somebody who's involved and one of my trusted agents, one of my circle of 5 kind of people?
Yeah.
Or are you just some fucking rando on Facebook?
Yeah.
All right. Some anonymous comment on the Amazon review list.
Right.
All right. And then the second thing that I ask is, are they right? Because even though they're an anonymous review on Amazon that gave me a 1 star or whatever, they might be right.
Yeah.
So I have to weigh that a little bit. Now they may not get as much weight as maybe what Katie says or what you say or something like that. But those are kind of the two tests that I give it is who gave it and is it valid?
Yeah. That's good, man. That's a good way to balance it.
Yeah. That's tough because, you know, you remember the negative shit.
Yeah, you do.
You remember the negative shit. You could do 1,000 really good things, but you screw one thing up, and people are going to remember the one screw up.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to some of that self-confidence and knowing yourself. Because here's a story I'll share. When I was at Pacific Command, I was in the group that I was in was a hodgepodge of me as the only Air Force guy, a couple Marines, a couple Navy guys, both pilots. One was a EA-6 guy, one was a Hornet guy that flew for the Blue Angels, and then an Army 06 that was in charge of us all. And, the Navy guys want to make fun of the Air Force fighter pilot guy, whatever. And so I come back from leave, and there's these pictures put up outside of my cubicle of like a crashed F-16 or something, and it had some words. I don't even remember what it said. So I see it. I don't pay any attention to it, right? And about 3 days later, my boss, the 06, comes up to me. He's kind of chuckling to himself, and he goes, "Hey, Cass, sorry. Hey, Jason, did you see this?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, what do you think?" Oh, it was something about being a stupid pilot, right? And I go, "I'm not a stupid pilot."
Yeah.
And he just looked at me, and he was like, "Oh," and he ripped it down. I'm like, "Yeah, dude, your fucking Ranger games don't work on me."
There's so many stories of, if you show people that it bothers you, then they're going to keep picking at the scab. But if you just, dude, I'm the only Wizzo within 300 miles of here. All right. People come out with their Wizzo jokes. Remember Fuego making his Wizzo jokes? And I just looked at him and said, "You need better material."
Yeah, seriously.
And, man, just move on. And then they're like, "Well, I guess that's not going to phase him. So I got to try a different approach,
The point is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
How I feel about myself or what I think about myself has nothing to do with what the two Navy guys or the jokes that they wanted to make about me, right? So anyways.
Well, I mean, constructive criticism is one thing, and poking fun and having jokes, office jokes, that's another
and that's
thing.
all it was.
Yeah.
It was just fun office stuff.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I probably wouldn't have taken all that shit seriously.
Yeah. No, and I didn't. But I'm just, as an example, saying,
no,
don't listen to the noise.
That's good stuff. Dude. Whew. That turned out to be that was a lot deeper than I thought it was going to get.
I was in a mood today.
Yeah. You a little salty today? I'm pissed off because these motherfuckers running in and out of
my goddamn house.
That's great. All right. We'll have to find an alternate recording location.
I hope the water's on.
As Cass is remodeling his place.
Jesus.
Well, what else you got, man?
Be the change.
Be the one.
Hey guys, one of the consistent topics we discuss on the Be One Change One podcast is the importance of resiliency, seizing opportunities, and choosing courage over comfort to achieve what is important to you. So if you're an outdoorsman, we would encourage you to explore Sick Bear Outdoors.
That's right. Sick Bear believes in using the symbol of resilience to empower your outdoor adventures and to experience the wildness of life's trails. Sick Bear adopts the bear's approach by fearlessly embracing nature, standing your ground, and courageously facing challenges. Get out of your comfort zone at sickbear.com. That's SICBEAR.com. Visit sickbear.com for all of your individual and family hunting, fishing, or outdoor adventure needs. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number one, change and the number one.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.